The Ice Cream Man. My name is Evan. I'm 23 years old, and the story I'm about to tell you is a true one I personally experienced in December 2017. More precisely on December 21st, 2017. At that time, I was 18. I had just gotten my driver's license, and I was the happiest young man in the world. It was almost Christmas, and the whole family had met at my paternal grandmother's house in the southwest of France. I was the last to go, everyone else was already there and waiting for me, so I had to make the trip alone. It was December 21st, 6:30 a.m. I had packed all my things the night before and got up at 5 a.m., so everything was ready to leave. Just as I was about to close the door behind me, something bothered me. Indeed, a very creepy little melody could be heard in the distance. It was a little music, exactly like that of American ice cream trucks. The sound was muffled, it crackled, as if it came out of a small radio from the 1950s. At that moment, I did not know if it came from inside the house or from outside. I should point out that the house was empty, in complete darkness, December obliges, and that therefore there was no reason for a melody like this to be heard at 6:30 in the morning. I even wondered if it was not just my imagination playing a trick on me. It was when I went back into the house to make sure that the music was not coming from inside that it stopped dead. So I told myself that it was indeed my imagination playing tricks on me. So I grabbed my things, closed the door, and headed towards my little Peugeot 207 parked down the street. It was while walking to my car that I noticed an old ice cream truck on a street corner turning into another street that led to a forest. I didn't ask myself any more questions than that. I just figured the music I thought I heard in the house was coming from this truck. It was an American-style ice cream truck, in poor condition, occasionally playing the music I had heard a few minutes earlier. I should point out that it was pitch black. It was 6:30 in the morning, and yes, this truck was driving alone in a small village near Paris. It may seem silly to you, but it didn't seem strange to me at the time. After putting my things in the trunk, I started the car and waited about 5 minutes for the engine to warm up. In that time, the truck had circled my village and arrived on my street. It passed by my car, all the lights on, the music too, and stopped next to me. The person driving was a man in his 60s, bearded and dirty. He looked at me with a dark look and then continued on his way. This event alone made my blood run cold. Unfortunately, it was only the beginning. So I hit the road, pretty scared but without any problems, until my first stop, a little after Tours. I stopped at a motorway service station to rest and fill up my car. I went into the service station, went to the bathroom, bought a coffee, and went outside to drink it with my cigarette. It was as I was about to throw away my coffee that my body froze when I heard the faint music of the ice cream truck on the other side of the service station. I immediately understood what was happening. This old man had followed me here. So I ran to my car, put it in first gear, and sped off. I had time to glance back at the place where the music was coming from, and sure enough, I could see the ice cream truck I'd seen at home. The man was driving and watching me leave. It was now 11 a.m. Day had broken, but so had the fog. The atmosphere was heavy, and we couldn't see 100 meters ahead. For some reason, a huge traffic jam had formed. Imagine my state when, in the thick fog, I was forced to stop the car, thinking I was being followed by a creepy old man in a van. That's when I knew it was serious. He was there about 10 cars away from me. He knew I was there. He'd turned on his music with the sole intention of freaking me out. I didn't take my eyes off him for a single second. My gaze was fixed on him in my rearview mirror. When traffic resumed, I sped off with the sole intention of losing him. For the rest of the journey, I did nothing but look behind me to see if he was still following me. After an 8:30 journey, I arrived at my grandmother's house. I hadn't seen this truck since the 11 a.m. traffic jam. To make matters worse, my grandmother lives in a small village of about 150 inhabitants. Each house was spaced about 200 meters from each other, each surrounded by a thick, very scary black forest. When I arrived, I dropped off my things, said hello to the family, and I immediately told my cousins what had happened to me. My cousins are called Pierre and Antoine. Pierre is the tallest. He is a handsome 28-year-old man, stocky and bearded, 1.95 meters tall. Antoine is 20 years old. He is shorter than us, but is very funny. They thought at first that I was playing a joke on them, since we used to tell each other scary stories once we arrived here. Then they saw the fear on my face and realized I wasn't joking. We had decided a few months earlier to go for a walk in the middle of the night in the scary forest, as we liked to call it when we were little. To be honest, after what had happened to me, I was quite reluctant, but I agreed to please them. Even though we knew this forest well, it lived up to its name, and in the middle of December, the fog that had rolled in made the atmosphere even more oppressive. So we set off, armed with our 3 flashlights, our down jackets, and a few beers, into this devilish forest. Our goal was an old lumberjack's cabin, abandoned for about 20 years, which had served as our landmark since our early childhood. It was about a 15-minute walk from our grandmother's house in a straight line. On the way, they asked me for details about what I had experienced. I told them everything and even managed to make them shudder. Pierre was in front, me in the middle, and Antoine behind. Pierre stopped dead in his tracks. He was frozen as if paralyzed. He asked us to back up. He told us he saw a figure moving in the darkness. He described this figure as an old man in his 60s, bearded and dirty. His description made my blood run cold. I explained to him that this description matched 100% of the man who followed me from my house, and their faces fell. The three of us started running toward the cabin, hoping to be safe. We rushed into it, closed the door behind us, turned off the lights, and lay down on the ground. After remaining motionless for 10 minutes, a shiver of fear ran through my body. The little music had just started. Having a panic attack, my cousins realized I'd already heard that little music, and that it was the famous ice cream man who was following me. We were still lying down, the music getting closer to where we were until we could hear him circling the cabin. Fortunately, the ice cream man didn't come in. We stayed like that for 2 hours, waiting in the dark. After 2 hours of waiting, we thought he'd left. So we started walking toward the house, our hearts pounding. The walk seemed extremely long, even though we were only 15 minutes away from home. Out of 3 flashlights, only one worked, and that's when a noise from behind us froze all 3 of us. Pierre, who was the only one with a working flashlight, turned around and saw the man standing about 10 meters away from us. He turned on the music and started chasing us. In one hand, he had a large butcher's knife, and in the other, a small flashlight with a sort of small radio around his neck, blasting creepy music. We ran for a good 10 minutes with this man chasing us. We finally arrived at a house whose lights were on. The 3 of us entered without knocking, shouting that we were being chased. A family, frightened to see us enter like that, kindly welcomed us. Without pausing to explain, we all looked out the window, and that's when we saw him for the last time. He was there in the darkness, between the trees, his flashlight pointed at his face, the knife in the other hand, and we could feel the hatred emanating from his dark gaze. The father, having seen the scene, immediately called the police, who arrived in about 20 minutes. We all testified, an investigation was opened, but no answers have yet been found to this day. So here I am, 5 years later, living my life with the fear of seeing him again one day. I ask myself a lot of questions. Why me? What could I have done to him? How did he follow me here, and how did he know we were going to the forest? I don't know if I will ever have answers, but what I do know is that this man is probably still wandering around in nature today, in his ice cream truck, and maybe even near your house. My brother's friend. Hi, I'm Valentine, and I'm going to tell you about a rather scary experience that happened to me. I'm 21 now, almost 22, and every time I think about it, I get a shiver. At the time of the incident, I was in high school. I don't remember exactly, but I'd say I was 16 or 17, in the 10th or 11th grade. To get to school every morning, I take the bus. It takes about 10 minutes to get to the bus stop closest to my house, but since the bus is often full when it arrives at that stop, I usually walk an extra 5 minutes to the one before to have a better chance of getting a seat. That morning, it was Monday, and when I left home, it was dark. It was winter, which is normal. I'm a pretty anxious person, and since on my route, I pass through a fairly isolated area with few pedestrians, I only put on my music once I arrive at the bus stop in order to stay alert to what's going on around me. That day, I arrive at the bus stop without any problem. I'm about to start my music when I hear a hi coming from my left. I take off my headphones and look at the person who just called out to me. He's a friend of my older brother. Everything's fine. We were together at school. He tells me that while talking recently with my brother, important detail, he learned that we were taking the same bus and that he found it funny. At the time, I didn't pay attention, but when I think about it now, this sentence should have caught my attention because I had never seen him at that stop before. We start talking, the bus arrives, I get on, but he doesn't. This intrigues me, but I don't ask any more questions and prefer to rush to take the last seat. The next morning, I run into this boy again, still at the bus stop, and we talk again. Once again, the bus arrives, I get on, but he doesn't. This continues for a few days until Friday, when this time I run into the same boy again. Not at my usual bus stop, but at the one closest to my house, the one I've been ignoring on my way. I pretend not to see him and continue on my way. He calls out to me. He joins me and we walk to the bus stop. During the ride, he asks me strange questions like, do you often travel alone? What time do you leave home? And what time do you come home in the evening? Which bus do you take? Are your parents at home when you get home? I quickly understand that these aren't trivial questions and avoid them. He ended up saying to me, it's weird that you're going to this bus stop when the other one is closer to your house. Do you live there? and giving my address. At that moment, I had a really bad feeling. Add to that all the questions he just asked me, and it started to get really weird. And most importantly, he'd never been to my house. This is a boy my brother got along with, but nothing more. As a result, he's never been to my house and has no other way of knowing my address. I don't answer, but he continues. You walk pretty fast. Leaving your house at 7:30, you get to the bus stop pretty quickly. I freeze. I hadn't answered his earlier question, so I hadn't told him what time I was leaving home. This discussion lasts what seems like an eternity until the bus finally arrives. I get on, feeling liberated, but then I hear this boy say, "See you tonight," while waving and smiling. I start to panic. My stomach hurts and I can't really think anymore. I grab my phone and send a message to my big brother. I ask him to tell his friend to leave me alone, that he's not making me feel comfortable. My brother calls me immediately and says, "But I haven't spoken to that guy since middle school at least. What did he tell you?" And then I understand. I understand that he hasn't had any contact with this boy for a long time, and that he lied to start talking to me. On the verge of tears, I tell my brother everything, all the strange questions he's asked me, and all the information he has about me, without me being able to explain how he got it. My brother tells me he'll sort it out and that I don't have to worry anymore. Evening arrives, I get off the bus, and surprise, no one is there. I rush home, checking behind me frequently to make sure I'm not being followed. When I arrive in front of my house, I rush to the door, open it, and lock myself in. My brother didn't come home for another hour, which seemed like an eternity. He came to see me and simply said, "Don't worry about that boy anymore. I've taken care of him. He won't bother you anymore." I never knew exactly what my brother said or even did to that boy, but I never saw him again, and that's all that matters. There you go. There are still a lot of gray areas in this story that will probably never be clarified, like how he got my address or the time I left home. I think he followed me at one point, but I prefer not to think about it. Since that day, I walk even faster when I'm alone. And after that incident, I tried to get dropped off at my bus stop by car as often as possible. It happened 15 years ago, and I'm still living with the consequences today. My name is Joan, pronounced Rowan, and I'm 30 years old today, to be exact. I'll be 31 on November 17th. What I'm about to tell you happened 15 years ago. It happened on Halloween night. I think that's why I feel the need to write this tonight, because it happened 15 years ago to the day. First of all, you should know that my mother had me very young. She was 16. I never knew my father, and today, honestly, that's not what matters most to me. I've learned to live with him, or rather without him. After me, my mother had 2 other children, 2 daughters, with a man she met later at work. They're still together today, by the way. Their first daughter, Sarah, was born to my mother at 28, and their second daughter, Rachel, was born to her at 31. At the time, Sarah was almost 4, and Rachel had just turned 1. As for me, I'll be 16 in 2 to 3 weeks. Remember, this was in 2005. It was Halloween night, and since I was almost 16, I used to babysit my little sisters for a few hours while our parents went shopping or enjoyed some alone time, which in fact is what they had decided to do that evening, as a sort of Halloween celebration. So I was alone in the house with the girls, and it was around 9 p.m. while I was watching TV that things started. I heard noise coming from the garden. At first, given the noise, I thought it was Sarah playing in her playhouse because, yes, she had a playhouse. Not in a tree, you know, the little plastic houses? That was it. And she always spent a lot of time there. It was her refuge, really. She had gotten it recently, so usually when we couldn't find her anywhere, we knew she was there. Except that it was late, at least for her, and she must have been in bed since 8:30 p.m., like every night. So I went outside with the aim of telling her to come inside and go to bed because it was no longer time to play. At first I didn't realize, and it was only once I was outside that I realized something important. I had tucked Sarah in at 8:30 p.m., and the only access to the garden is through the living room, the place where I was since I was watching TV. Also, the door was closed, and I was the one who opened it. Yet I was 100% certain I'd heard a noise and that it was coming from the cabin. That's when I started to really panic and felt a knot in my stomach. I had a really bad feeling, and yet like an idiot, I questioned myself and thought I'd probably heard wrong. That it was probably the wind that had slammed one of the cabin's little shutters or something logical like that. And I went inside to continue watching TV in peace, if only I'd known. Minutes passed and my stomach still wasn't feeling any better. And when I say minutes, actually it must have been only 2 minutes between the moment I sat back in front of the TV and the moment I decided to get up. I had this doubt and this bad feeling that weighed on me so much that it hurt. I even felt like I was getting feverish. In order to reassure myself, I wanted to go check on my sisters, and I started by checking Rachel's room, my 1-year-old sister, because her room was on the ground floor like my parents'. She was sleeping peacefully, everything was in place, everything was fine, but yet a voice was screaming at me not to leave her alone. Above all, not to take my eyes off her. Until that day, my instinct had never failed me. That's why I went up to check that everything was okay. So I listened to it again, and I gently took my little sister in my arms. At first it woke her up and she started crying to express her displeasure. But it wasn't that noise that scared me. It was the sound of footsteps that I heard coming from outside through her window. Footsteps that were getting further away as if the person was running, until I couldn't hear anything anymore. I was going to go check through the window to see if there was actually someone or footprints in the dirt, just to prove that I wasn't going completely crazy. But this time, it was my sister I heard screaming. Not Rachel, who was in my arms, but Sarah, who was normally in her room upstairs. While holding the baby in my arms, I ran, or at least I ran as fast as I could. But I didn't need to go up because the front door, which was roughly opposite the stairs, was wide open. And a man was coming out. He was right there on the steps. In fact, he had just opened the door to leave when I arrived in the hall. He must have rushed when Sarah screamed, and she was in his arms. I followed him, but unfortunately he reached a car parked in front of the house and he drove into it, still holding my sister. From then on, it only lasted a few seconds, but unfortunately, a few seconds too long. I was terrified to see Sarah being taken away before my eyes. I wanted to act. She was calling for help. And at the same time, I felt like I couldn't do anything, because I still had Rachel in my arms, I remind you. Trying to intervene with a 1-year-old baby in my arms, and still crying, would have put her in danger too. And I was torn between trying something, anything, or keeping Rachel safe. And above all, I was shocked. I was wondering if this was really happening, if my little 4-year-old sister was about to be peacefully taken away right before my eyes. And unfortunately, those few seconds of hesitation were enough. That's all it takes to start a car. And I just saw my sister walking away from me, and I could still hear her screaming my name. And I was like an idiot, frozen in the middle of the street doing nothing. When my parents got home, the police, whom I had called, were already there. And the investigation revealed several things. Footprints in the garden, especially around my sister's little cabin. So there was definitely a man who had made noise to attract me. And unfortunately, I was the one who let him in when I opened the door. He slipped in while I was checking the cabin. And we learned something else too. That the flower beds at the foot of Rachel's bedroom window had been trampled. Because there was someone there too. You should know that the window in this bedroom, like the ones in the living room, because they're on the same wall. It was a sliding window simply held closed by a system of magnets, but it's therefore very easy to open from the inside, as well as from the outside. So someone was definitely preparing to kidnap Rachel too, but he probably fled when he saw me near her or heard her crying. One of the two, or both. 3 days later, 2 of the men were found, as was the car. Unfortunately, they probably had accomplices who were never caught, and my sister never came home. It's been 15 years tonight, and I still wonder where she is, and even if she's still alive, what they did to her. My parents and I never talk about it. It's a taboo subject because even today my mother bursts into tears when we bring it up. And I've felt since that day that she's mad at me. And I'm mad at myself too, because I literally stood there frozen watching that guy take my sister away. I keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't taken Rachel with me, or if I had tried something anyway. If this story moved you, or made you think twice about the world around you, consider subscribing. There are more true stories, some heartbreaking, some terrifying, waiting to be told. You can check out my other videos right here. I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe out there.